Picture this. You wake up on a Tuesday morning, grab your coffee, and find a bright yellow violation notice taped to your front door. Your heart drops as you read the most ridiculous demand you've ever seen. Your HOA is now requiring you to keep your garage door wide open for 8 hours every single day, exposing thousands of dollars of your personal belongings to anyone walking by. Refuse to comply. That'll be a $200 fine per day. This actually happened to me, and if you think your HOA is bad, just wait until you hear how mine tried to turn our entire neighborhood into some kind of Big Brother surveillance community where privacy was literally illegal. If you've ever dealt with a crazy HOA or property dispute, hit that like button and comment below with your story. This will show you exactly how to fight back and win. Now, let me take you back to the beginning of this insane story. When I first moved into Willowbrook Commons 3 years ago, I thought I'd found the perfect suburban neighborhood. The houses were beautiful, the lawns were pristine, and everything looked like something straight out of a magazine. What I didn't realize was that this picture-perfect community came with a homeowners association that would make my life absolutely miserable over something as simple as my garage door. It all started on a Tuesday morning in September when I found a bright yellow notice taped to my front door. The header read "Violation Notice" in bold red letters, and my heart immediately sank. I'd been living here for over 2 years without any issues, so I couldn't imagine what I could have possibly done wrong. The notice stated that effective immediately, all residents were required to keep their garage doors open from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. daily, Monday through Friday. The reason given was to prevent unauthorized occupancy and ensure compliance with residential zoning laws. Any homeowner who failed to comply would face a $200 fine for each day of violation. I read the notice 3 times, convinced I must have misunderstood something. They wanted me to keep my garage door open for 8 hours every single day. My garage contained thousands of dollars worth of tools, sporting equipment, and personal belongings. The idea of leaving it completely exposed to anyone walking by seemed absolutely insane. I immediately called the HOA office to speak with someone about what I assumed must be some kind of mistake. The receptionist transferred me to Margaret Thompson, the HOA president, who had a reputation in the neighborhood for being particularly strict about rule enforcement. Margaret explained that the new policy was implemented after several complaints about possible illegal occupancy in garage spaces. She claimed that some residents might be allowing people to live in converted garages, which would violate local zoning ordinances. By requiring all garage doors to remain open during business hours, they could ensure that no one was using these spaces as unauthorized living quarters. When I pointed out the obvious security concerns and the fact that most people store valuable items in their garages, Margaret's response was dismissive. She told me that if I had nothing to hide, I shouldn't have any problem with the new rule. She also mentioned that the policy had been voted on and approved by the HOA board, making it legally binding for all residents. I hung up the phone, feeling frustrated and confused. How could an HOA possibly have the authority to force homeowners to leave their personal property exposed to theft? It seemed like a massive overreach of power, but I wasn't sure what my options were. Over the next few days, I noticed that most of my neighbors were reluctantly complying with the new rule. Garage doors throughout the neighborhood stood open like gaping mouths, revealing everything from expensive cars to children's bicycles to workshop equipment. The whole situation felt dystopian, like we were living in some kind of surveillance state where privacy was no longer allowed. I decided I needed to understand exactly what legal authority the HOA actually had over my property. I spent my weekend digging through the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that governed our neighborhood, also known as the CC&Rs. These documents outlined what the HOA could and couldn't regulate, and I was determined to find out if this garage door policy was actually enforceable. What I discovered was eye-opening. The CC&Rs gave the HOA authority to regulate external appearances of properties, maintain common areas, and enforce certain behavioral standards. However, there was nothing in the document that gave them the right to control how homeowners used the interior of their garages, or to mandate that private storage areas be left open and visible. More importantly, I learned that HOA rules must be reasonable and cannot violate local, state, or federal laws. Forcing homeowners to leave valuable property unsecured seemed like it could potentially violate our rights to privacy and security of personal property. I decided to dig deeper into the legal aspects of the situation. I discovered that many states have specific laws governing what HOAs can and cannot do. In particular, I found information about the concept of reasonable expectation of privacy and how it applies to homeowner rights. My research revealed that several courts had ruled against HOAs that implemented overly invasive policies. There were cases where HOAs had been forced to pay damages to homeowners whose rights were violated by unreasonable rules. This gave me hope that I might have a legitimate case against the garage door policy. I also learned about something called the Fair Housing Act, which protects people from discrimination in housing. While this primarily applies to things like race, religion, and disability status, I wondered if forcing people to expose their personal belongings might constitute a form of harassment that could violate these protections. Armed with this information, I decided to take action. My first step was to request copies of all the documentation related to the garage door policy. As a homeowner, I had the right to see the minutes from HOA board meetings and any votes that had been taken on new policies. When I received the documents, I discovered something interesting. The vote to implement the garage door policy had been taken at an emergency board meeting that was not properly announced to residents. According to our HOA bylaws, homeowners were supposed to receive at least 72 hours notice of any board meetings, especially those where new policies would be voted on. The meeting minutes also revealed that only 3 of the 5 board members had been present for the vote, and there was no record of any discussion about the potential legal implications of the policy. It appeared that Margaret Thompson had pushed the policy through without proper consideration or community input. I also found records showing that the complaints about illegal occupancy were vague and unsubstantiated. There were no specific addresses mentioned, no evidence provided, and no official investigations conducted. The entire policy seemed to be based on rumors and speculation rather than actual problems. With this information in hand, I decided to consult with a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. The consultation fee was $200, but I figured it was worth it to understand my legal options. The attorney reviewed all of my documentation and confirmed what I had suspected. The HOA had likely overstepped their authority with the garage door policy. She explained that while HOAs can regulate many aspects of property appearance and use, they cannot implement policies that unreasonably invade privacy or put homeowners' security at risk. She also pointed out that the policy had been implemented without proper procedures, which made it potentially invalid from a legal standpoint. The lack of proper notice and community input could be grounds for challenging the entire policy. The lawyer suggested that I could take several approaches to fight the policy. I could file a complaint with the state agency that oversees I could demand that the policy be put to a proper community vote, or I could challenge specific fines if the HOA attempted to enforce the rule against me. I decided to start with a formal written complaint to the HOA board. In my letter, I outlined all of the legal issues I had identified with the garage door policy. I cited specific sections of the CC&RS that I believed were being violated, referenced relevant state laws about privacy rights, and pointed out the procedural problems with how the policy had been implemented. I also included a detailed explanation of why the policy was unreasonable and potentially dangerous. I pointed out that leaving garages open would increase theft, create insurance liability issues, and potentially violate local building codes related to security and weather protection. The letter demanded that the HOA immediately suspend the garage door policy and hold a proper community meeting to discuss the alleged occupancy issues. I also requested that any fines already issued be rescinded and that the board implement a more reasonable solution to their concerns. I sent copies of my letter to all 5 board members and requested a response within 10 business days. I also decided to start documenting everything related to the dispute, including taking photos of my closed garage door each day and keeping records of any communications with the HOA. While I waited for a response, I began reaching out to my neighbors to gauge their feelings about the policy. What I discovered was that most people were just as unhappy as I was, but they felt powerless to do anything about it. Many homeowners had simply accepted that they had to comply, even though they hated the invasion of privacy and security concerns. Started sharing the information I had learned about HOA legal limits and homeowner rights. I created a simple 1-page summary explaining why the garage door policy might be illegal and what options residents had for fighting it. I distributed this information to interested neighbors and encouraged them to do their own research. The response from the HOA came exactly 10 days after I sent my letter. Margaret Thompson sent me a brief dismissive reply that basically told me the policy was final and that I needed to comply or face fines. She claimed that the board had full authority to implement the rule, and that any legal challenges would be unsuccessful. The letter also included a thinly veiled threat that continued resistance could result in additional penalties and potential legal action against me. This heavy-handed response only strengthened my resolve to fight the policy. I decided to take my complaint to the next level by filing a formal dispute with the state's HOA oversight agency. Many states have departments that handle complaints about homeowner association abuses. and I wanted to get an official opinion on whether the garage door policy was legal. The complaint process required detailed documentation of the dispute, copies of all relevant communications, and a clear explanation of how the HOA had allegedly violated state laws or regulations. I spent several hours preparing a comprehensive complaint package that included everything I had gathered during my research. While waiting for the state agency to respond, I continued building support among my neighbors. Word had spread about my challenge to the garage door policy, and I was surprised by how many people reached out to express their support. Several neighbors offered to join any legal action or community effort to fight the rule. We formed an informal group of concerned homeowners who began meeting regularly to discuss the issue. Our group grew to include about 20 families, representing nearly a quarter of the neighborhood. This level of support gave me confidence that we could create real pressure for change. The breakthrough came when one of my neighbors, a retired police officer named Jim, pointed out something crucial that I had missed. The garage door policy, as written, could actually violate local building and safety codes. Most municipal codes require that residential garages have proper closure systems for weather protection and security. Forcing homeowners to leave these doors open during all weather conditions could put the HOA in violation of local ordinances. This revelation gave us a new avenue for challenging the policy. We began researching local building codes and found several regulations that appeared to conflict with the HOA's requirements. This meant that homeowners were being put in the impossible position of having to choose between violating HOA rules or violating municipal codes. Armed with this new information, our group decided to attend the next HOA board meeting, en masse. We prepared a presentation outlining all of the legal, safety, and practical problems with the garage door policy. We also brought a petition signed by over 30 homeowners requesting that the policy be immediately rescinded. The board meeting turned out to be more successful than we had hoped. When faced with a room full of angry homeowners armed with legal research and valid concerns, the board quickly realized they were in over their heads. Margaret Thompson tried to defend the policy, but the other board members seemed uncomfortable with the level of opposition and the legal issues we had raised. After 2 hours of heated discussion, the board agreed to suspend the garage door policy pending further legal review. They also committed to holding a community-wide meeting to discuss alternative solutions to their occupancy concerns. Within a week, I received a letter from the state HOA oversight agency supporting my complaint. Their investigation had concluded that the garage door policy likely exceeded the HOA's authority and violated several state regulations regarding homeowner privacy and security rights. The state agency ordered the HOA to permanently rescind the policy and to refund any fines that had been collected from homeowners. They also placed the association under increased oversight to prevent similar overreaches in the future. The entire experience taught me an important lesson about standing up for your rights as a homeowner. HOAs have legitimate purposes and can provide valuable services to communities, but they are not above the law. When they overstep their authority, homeowners have both the right and the responsibility to push back. Today, my garage door opens and closes on my schedule, not the HOA. The association has implemented more reasonable policies for addressing occupancy concerns, including a proper complaint and investigation process that respects homeowner privacy. And perhaps most importantly, my neighbors and I learned that we have more power than we realized when we work together to protect our rights.